With practice, most of things in life come without a big struggle. Life has become simple and the inner dialogue has become very quiet. Good and bad things come without strong differentiation and are part of life. But I am a mother of a toddler, and after passing wonderful time of just being now, and after passing wonderful time of just being now the ego, emotions and thinking appear strongly. Being a container to all these strong reactions, witnessing this uncontrolled struggle sometimes breaks my heart. I would like to ask how to integrate acceptance of things as they are, willingness to help, and the impossibility to help the ones we love. It's a good question. How to integrate the acceptance of things as they are. How to integrate the acceptance of things as they are. A big part of that is noticing that at any moment, that moment is unavoidably as it is. Each moment. This moment. It's unavoidably exactly the way it is. Right? It's unavoidably exactly the way it is. And to say no, to oppose, to fight against it, will just cause conflict. Now, there's more to the story. I'll get to that in a minute. But let's start there as the foundation. As the foundation. And part of accepting things as they are is maybe you don't like them the way they are. You can accept that too. So I'm accepting things the way they are. I'm accepting that maybe I don't like the way something is. All of it can come under the umbrella of your acceptance. You see, even your non-acceptance can be accepted. That's kind of requires a kind of human humility, right, to do that. How to integrate acceptance of things as they are, willingness to help. A willingness to help. Yeah, that's natural. I'm sure as a mother you have no lack of a willingness to help, especially your child or your children. So I don't think we have to talk about that a lot. A willingness to help and the impossibility to help the ones we love. Have you ever experienced that? I imagine most of you have had somebody you love. It could be a lover, it could be a child, it could be a friend, it could be, but somebody you really care about. And you just can't take their struggle away. You can't take their suffering away. You can't remove it from them. Maybe it's kind of one of the heartbreaks of life, right? That we can't just wave a wand and help someone and make everything just magically disappear. First of all, they have to want help. If somebody doesn't want help, then all the help in the world isn't going to have any effect. So someone needs to want to have help. And even though we do help, we do what we can, maybe out of compassion or love or caring or whatever, there's going to be limits to that, right? We can't control someone's life, nor should we. Nor should we think that everyone's sorrows or their sufferings or their difficulties or their struggles are somehow a mistake, that's something that shouldn't happen. Most of us, the majority of our real life lessons, our real learning in life, comes through the confrontation with struggle and suffering. Suffering is an amazing teacher. Doesn't mean we'll always be open to learning from our suffering, but when we are, wow, suffering is an amazing teacher. And that doesn't mean that therefore you just sit back and let people suffer when you could otherwise help them, because compassion and love can be an amazing teacher too, and help and service. It can all these things. But when we really have a really big view, it's almost like try sometimes to step back and then step back more and then step back more, like you're getting perspective, like here we are on earth and you Imagine you step, you go up into the air 5 feet, and then 100 feet, and then 1,000 feet, and then 10,000 feet, and then a mile, and then 10 miles, and then 1,000 miles out into space. And at each way along the way, there's a different perspective. Perspective is sort of generated. So the more perspective we get, the more we can hold all of what you're talking about together. We want to help sometimes, and then sometimes someone's just not ready for help, or maybe they need to struggle because that's how they learn. And as my teacher gave me a piece of advice when she asked me to teach, she gave me a few of them. One of them was, be very careful of how much suffering you take away from people, because you may be taking away their best chance at awakening. It's interesting, isn't it? She didn't say don't help people with their suffering. I mean, my God, that's why I'm teaching, right? That's why I'm answering questions. That's why I give talks. That's why I do this, at least in part. That's why I do this. To do what I can, right? That sort of just that compassionate call to be of service. And yet, her counsel was also so wise. She wasn't saying don't try to help anybody with their suffering. I mean, she spent 30 years teaching herself. So clearly that's not what she was saying. But what she was saying is, like, just don't assume that all suffering is wrong or bad, or you need to eradicate it for people as quickly as possible. Because suffering is probably the greatest motivator to our own evolution that there is. If it wasn't for suffering, probably most all of us would stay perfectly asleep forever. And as my teacher also used to say, she talked about what she called the great heartbreak. And for her, the great heartbreak was just encountering the immensity of suffering of the world, human beings, but not just human beings, that there is. And knowing that no matter what you do, you can't just make it all go away. Just to be open to that that much sorrow can be almost overwhelming. It's overwhelming if you try to contain it. If the suffering comes in and kind of stops with you. But if you don't have any ideas about it shouldn't happen, or how terrible it is, or how awful, like all those ideas will make suffering stop in you. And then you will start to take on other people's suffering, because you have either conscious or unconscious beliefs of it shouldn't be happening, it's so terrible, nobody should suffer, whatever it is. Or you can have a savior complex where you think your job is to, process the suffering of all of humanity or something like that. Watch out if you have that, because suffering will be more than happy to have you process it. And you can very quickly find yourself totally overwhelmed. So be very careful of the background beliefs that you might not even know that you have around the whole issue of suffering. But there is a heartbreak to it. And as my teacher said, the whole idea is let it break your heart, but let it break it all the way open. And that was so key. Because, you can encounter either the suffering of the world or just the suffering of your own child or someone you love, and it just starts to tear you apart, because you care so much. And, you don't want the people you love and care about, or really anybody for that matter, but especially the people that are close to you, you don't want them to go through unnecessarily suffering. So it can be heartbreaking that, sometimes you just got to let something play out. And yet you don't want to just be heartbroken. That heartbreaking where you're just, and you're just overwhelmed by it and consumed by it. That's when your heart is broken, but you haven't allowed it to break open. So let your heart break, but let it break all the way open. People are afraid of that because they think they'll just get totally lost in the sorrow of the suffering of the world. And, if you stop in the middle of it, if you have some belief pattern about how terrible that is, how it shouldn't be, how, all that, then you can get stuck in the middle of it. But if you let go of those patterns of belief and conclusion as they arise, then the heart breaks open and it's not stuck, because you suffering over someone else's suffering, or you suffering over the world's suffering, doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the world. It doesn't help the people that are suffering if you're suffering right along with them. That doesn't help anybody. In fact, you've just doubled the problem. Now you got two people that are overwhelmed and suffering. But if the suffering can break your heart open, it breaks your heart open into compassion and into love. But not a love that says, oh, this shouldn't be happening, but a love that's just a sort of bestowing of a sense of, like I said, a sense of compassion. But also within that love and compassion is the acceptance of life as it actually is. Suffering's a part of life. Like the Buddha told us that 2,500 years ago. Suffering is innate to existence.